Is our DNA really 98% similar to chimps? Let's take a look. Hey, thank you for clicking on this Redeemed in Christ Ministries video. I'm Reborn Russell, and today we're going to look at DNA. Is this really evidence of evolution? Are we really 98% similar to chimps? Or is this another false evidence from evolution? So we are going to take a look at a couple clips. One from a secular YouTube channel and one from a Christian. And we're going to see what both sides have to say. Let's take a look at this video from Minute Earth. It's a secular channel on YouTube that teaches about evolution and other subjects. And let's see what they have to say on chimp and human DNA.
It's often said that we humans share 50% of our DNA with bananas, 80% with dogs, and 99% with chimpanzees. Taken literally, those numbers make it sound like we could.
So right off the bat, I'd like to say that evolutionists like to say that we are related to bananas. And if you go all the way back, all the way to rocks, which I had mentioned in another video, that we came from some primordial soup. And I think this is just silly to think. You know, DNA actually, it's a code. And we'll get into this more, but like any code, there has to be intelligence behind the code. You can't just... Computers don't just write themselves unless a person's programmed the computer to write another computer program. But somewhere the intelligence started. Has to be a source outside of us. Well, let's get back to this video.
Pluck one cell from a chimp and one from a human, pull out the tangled bundles of DNA known as chromosomes, unroll each one like a scroll, and read off two nearly identical strings of letters. But in reality, the human and chimp scrolls don't sync up so easily. In the 6 to 8 million years since we split from our last common ancestor, chance mutations and natural selection have changed each of our genomes in radical and unique ways. Two human scrolls fused, leaving us with 23 pairs of chromosomes to chimp's 24. Other large mutations revised huge sections of text, duplicating a chunk of human DNA here, erasing a chunk of chimp DNA there, while throughout the scrolls, tiny mutations swapped one letter for another. When researchers sat down to compare the chimp and human genomes, those single-letter differences were easy to tally, but the big mismatch sections weren't. For example, if a genetic paragraph, thousands of letters long, appears twice in a human scroll, but only once in its chimp counterpart, should that second human copy count as thousands of changes, or just one? And what about identical paragraphs that appear in both genomes, but in different places, or in reverse order, or broken up into pieces? Rather than monkey around with these difficult questions, the researchers simply excluded all the large mismatch sections, a whopping 1.3 billion letters in all, and performed a letter-by-letter comparison on the remaining 2.4 billion, which turned out to be 98.77% identical. So, yes, we share 99% of our DNA with chimps if we ignore 18% of their genome and 25% of ours.
So, we're actually not 98 or 99% compatible with chimps. I mean, add 27 and 18. We are missing a ton of DNA. It's a faulty assumption. It's a lie they stick out there. It's flat out a lie. We're more like 75, maybe 78. Probably not even that. So, it's really just it's a lie. Let's get back to this video.
And there's another problem. Just as a small tweak in a sentence can alter its meaning entirely, or not at all, a few mutations in DNA sometimes produce big changes in a creature's looks or behavior, whereas other times, lots of mutations make very little difference. So just counting up the number of genetic changes doesn't really tell us that much about how similar or different two creatures are. But that doesn't mean we can't learn anything by comparing their genomes. DNA contains a record of the evolutionary relationships between all organisms. It's a garbled record, but by reading closely, we've been able to glean enough information to refine the evolutionary trees we started drawing long before genome sequencing was around.
Wait, how did you start drawing DNA trees before you had DNA? How did you draw these evolutionary trees? How did you know what branched off what? Oh, they guessed. They just said this came from this, or this looks like it came from this. It wasn't science. Most of the stuff you're taught isn't even science-based, or it's fabricated, just like Haeckel's recapitulation embryology fake that we talked about before in another video. They don't even know. They just made it up. And now they're saying, that we can trace this back. They can't trace it back. When they trace DNA all the way back, they don't run into monkeys and primates. They can't even trace it back past human. Well, let's finish up this video.
Not actually be 99% chimp, but we are 100% great ape, and at least a little bananas.
So, she finishes it up with that we're great ape and a little bananas. Yes. It's ridiculous. I'd also like to point out that we don't have the same chromosomes, which they kind of just flew over in this. They said, these things came together, fused, and so we have a less chromosome. Well, they don't actually know that. That's a guess. I mean, if they knew that, they would say that its evolution is... it would be undisputable proof. But they don't. It's a guess. They think this happened. And see, that's where they step out of actually doing science and evolution becomes a religion. Because they have faith that this happened. There isn't evidence for it. In fact, they have to make up evidence. They have to tout that we're 98% similar to chimps when we're not. They're excluding 23% of the human DNA and 17% of the monkey's DNA. Well, that's a total exclusion of 40% of the DNA. It's pretty ridiculous. So let's take a look at this Genesis Apologetics website. This is by Dan Biddle. This is his ministry, and it says human and sheep DNA, is it really 98% similar? I'm going to show a clip from this video, and it's going to talk about where that other video kind of talked about you can't just replace genes. Like when you change something in a sentence, it completely changes the sentence. Let's take a look at the clip.
Makes sense that just counting up the number of genetic changes doesn't really tell us that much about how similar or different two creatures are. Indeed, human DNA and gene-level comparisons are frequently made to other mammals, such as mice, cows, and even dogs with high levels of overlap. And we are obviously quite different from these animals. The fact is, the human and chimp genomes code for two completely different creatures. While both are mammals based on scientific criteria, God made man in His image and gave him a soul that is eternal. Chimps, which are soulless tree-dwelling animals, and humans, which are eternal souls wrapped in bodies that have vastly different capabilities than all animals, because we were created in God's image and charged to be caretakers over creation, including chimps. Being made in the image of God and charged with taking care over God's creation would mean that humans would have several distinctions from chimps. Let's take a look at just some of them. First, humans are the only living thing on the planet that has a conscience and a sense of morality. Our conscience lets us know when we failed or when we might fail to abide by either governmental laws or God's laws. Primates know nothing of laws. They live only by instincts. Next, humans can speak. For example, the English language contains over 1 million words, and we can speak all of them. Plus, we can even learn or invent totally different languages. Apes cannot speak any of them. They do not even have a speech program installed in their brains. Speaking of brains, ours are 400% larger than chimps. We're also much smarter, having an average IQ of 100 when chimps can't even take the test. Our brain cells' DNA carries very unique methylation patterns that enables us to think the way we do. The human neocortex is disproportionately large compared to the rest of the brain, with a 60-to-1 ratio of gray matter to the size of the medulla in our brainstems compared to just 30-to-1 in chimps. Overall, humans have almost twice as many spindle cells than chimps, enabling us to pull out memories from past experiences and use them to plot our next actions. These functions activate when moral dilemmas present decisions we need to make that will directly affect other lives. The insula part of our brains has 46 times the number of spindle cells compared to chimps, about 83,000 for humans compared to only about 1,800 for chimps. This makes sense because this part of our brain takes information from our skin, internal organs, and cardio system and converts it into subjective feelings such as...
So this video goes on longer and I'm going to leave a link to it. But we're vastly different from every animal, including chimps. Our DNAs do not match up. There's nothing about our DNA that is the same. And what we're really forgetting about, and what people tend not to want to talk about, is what I mentioned earlier. The DNA is a code. It is a code. It is like writing a computer code, except for way more complex than anything we've ever accomplished as humans. No person has ever wrote a code as complex as DNA. So here's an article from Answers in Genesis, where they make the conclusion that DNA similarity could just as easily be explained as the result of a common creator. And that, like I said before, the chimp and human genomes are only about 70% similar without the pre-selecting, because those scientists went through and cherry-picked. It's called cherry-picking your information. And you can make anything seem like anything if you want to cherry-pick information. And that's what those scientists did. They went around and cherry-picked all the information to make it so they could say, hey, we're 98% similar. Because that's what fits their faith, their belief in the religion of evolution. And here's another article from ICR. And they talk about how DNA and RNA are providential coding to revere God. And they're making a slight pun off of Paul Revere, because they're saying that, and they're doing that because of the small poem about Paul Revere, 1 if by land, 2 if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be, ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm, for the country folk to be open in arm. This poem was talking about how they used the light signal. 1 lantern would be hung if they came by land, and 2 would be hung if they came by sea. And that's a code. And there's code in the DNA. So they say evolutionists doesn't demonstrate the inexcusable illogic of crediting this remarkable communication system to natural selection by describing its supposedly accidental parts and process using vocabulary that sounds like the cryptographic vocabulary of spies and secret agents. In other words, evolutionists use words that prove that they are observing providentially programmed biomolecular communication at work. So it goes into what happens in the mitochondrial cells and other genetic stuff. You can read the article. What they're saying, though, is exactly what Richard Dawkins was saying to Ben Stein in that video. That if you look at molecular biology or biochemistry, it shows evidence of design because it's a code. And we are just now figuring out that code. And before, scientists would say there's a lot of junk DNA. And I'm going to get into that on the next video. Here's another article from Answers in Genesis. Are humans and chimps related? It is one of the most asked questions we receive at Answers in Genesis. If human and chimp DNA are so similar, does this show a common ancestor? And they go into basically how it's not similar, as we've seen, and how they say it should be pointed out that most of the DNA sequence performs an unknown function and has been largely dismissed as junk DNA. However, increasing evidence supports the view that junk DNA performs an important role in the regulation of genes and proteins. And we're going to get more into the junk DNA in the next video. So, are we 98% similar to chimps? The answer is no. It's just more false evidence for a religion that they push on children and everyone else in movies like Jurassic Park. Every day it's pushed. So I'd like to end this video with a prayer. Lord, I come before you humbled. I thank you for allowing me to have the ability to make this video. I ask that you give those that are supposed to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear just that. I ask that your will be done through this video. As I pray for the persecuted Christians around the earth. I pray for anyone that might have been ridiculed as a child for being a Christian who once knew you and fell away, that they come back to know you. And Lord, I thank you. I give you the honor, the glory, and the praise. In Jesus Christ now I pray. Amen. Hey, thank you for watching. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, you can do that at redeemedinChrist1@gmail.com. You can also go to our website at redeemedinChristministries.com and contact us through that. And I'd just like to thank you for watching this video. And hopefully you can join us for the next video where we talk about junk DNA. And is it really junk? Have a great day.
Thank you for watching this video.